Today, the Catholic Church keeps the feast of St. Francis of Assisi, after whom originally, when I was born, I was named. I have a very confused religious and secular past, stretching over a number of different religions, and but I was originally named Francis, and then about 3 years later I was adopted and given another name. But so I've always had a sort of soft spot for Francis of Assisi, and I was rather entertained when, at the age of 28 or 20, something like that, I discovered that I had been adopted and that my original name was Francis. So I thought, ooh, that's very exciting. This barefoot friar who called himself Il Poverello, the little poor man. He preached to birds, he embraced lepers, he renounced wealth, and he founded a movement whose simplicity reshaped medieval Christianity. He was more than a Catholic Dr. Dolittle, but he had no interest in image. But 8 centuries later, on the day he is honoured, our screens are full of priests perfecting the image, guitar-playing Don Ambrogio Mazzai, the gym-streaming Father Alberto Ravagnani, tattooed art historian Father Giuseppe Fusari, the Anglican hot priest Father Chris Lee, even Calvin Robinson, styling himself as a defender of tradition while operating in a semi-Catholic space on the right wing. Faith is now scrolling past us on Instagram. Francis changed the church by walking into a public square of his own age, the marketplace and the roadside, not the cloister. And his genius was meeting ordinary people where they are, speaking the vernacular, dramatizing the gospel in living nativity scenes and simple joy. Instagram is for our century what the medieval piazza was for his, a noisy, visual, popular space. Priests who go there echo Francis's instinct: leave the sacristy, go where souls wander. But Francis's power came from radical authenticity. He had nothing to sell, not even an image. And by contrast, the Instagram priest faces the temptation to curate holiness like a lifestyle brand. Father Ravagnani says supplements help him to stay fit to serve, but a sponsorship deal sits awkwardly with vows of simplicity. Calvin Robinson's aesthetic traditionalism draws attention, but is it evangelization or personal platform building? And Francis teaches us that influence flows from poverty of spirit, not self-promotion. It flows from the change inside. In Francis's case, that change inside was so significant that he was left with the marks of the stigmata. Still, the missionary impulse matters. Surveys show that young adults are the one group where Catholic attendance is rising again. Many first encounter faith online. A priest who bikes, sings, preaches in a 60-second reel may be the only gospel they glimpse, and Francis would have understood that urgency. Go and repair my church. For a generation formed by feeds, repair begins with presence in the feed. Yet the church, I think, is absolutely right to be wary. Instagram's logic is likes, algorithms, beauty and novelty, and it can cheapen vocation, entangle clergy in commercial deals, and build cults of personality that collapse if the influencer falls. The Franciscan charism warns, do not let the medium own the message. The friar's humility is a needed counterweight to the seductive metrics of the digital frame. And this isn't just Rome's struggle. Anglican vicars such as Chris Lee and Calvin Robinson have built large audiences. Calvin markets himself as a kind of Catholic adjacent culture warrior. Digital celebrity now crosses confessional lines. For some, it genuinely invites people to prayer. For others, it risks theatrical piety. Francis would remind them the cross is not a prop. On his feast, we might ask, if St. Francis had Instagram, what would he post? Probably not product placement or polished selfies. Perhaps a photo of lepers embraced, a video blessing animals, a silent story of prayer under the stars, a story about animals. The challenge for today's priest influencers is not to abandon the platform, but to inhabit it with Francis's poverty, peace and joy, to influence not by looking perfect, but by being real. If the church can carry that spirit into the digital piazza, Instagram may yet become a pulpit worthy of the saint whose life shapes the gospel's reach and who reached out to Islam and to other traditions as well. I think St. Francis's mission and St. Francis's life speaks well beyond the framework of the traditional and the non-traditional Catholic Church. Whether these are breakaway schismatic churches in Spain, or whether this is the Church of Calvin Robinson, or the Church of the Anglican Communion, which is now being revitalized by the news that it's got a new Archbishop of Canterbury. But I think it can go well beyond that. It can the story of Francis, this man who so trusted in his mission that it was emblazoned on his flesh, who took literalism to a point of absurdity, who was laughed at, is now revered. He is very much the Carlo Acutis of his day, and like Carlo Acutis, he died young, but his influence was extraordinary in his day, and has been extraordinary ever since. And his influence spread so rapidly during his lifetime and shortly after. He wasn't blessed with Instagram, but he was blessed with charisma and the extraordinary energy of communication.